You are ready? Okay. I want to complete Mimamsa today. Let me see. Now there is one topic that has been lingering from the beginning. This is called Khyadivada. Theories of error, theories of perceptual error. Theories of perceptual error. Khyadi means cognition. Is a error in perceptual cognition. We are not concerned with inferential errors. Perceptual error, it is technically called Khyadivada. I don't know the origin. The meaning of Khyadi is cognition. So theories about certain problems with regard to cognition, perceptual problems. Every system has got something to say on the problem. Sometimes two systems may agree, may not agree. Now broadly, it is divided into, let's say, theories of error, perceptual error, perceptual error. Khyadivada. They are broadly divided into two. Satyadi and Asatyadi. How does this division start? How does it start? The question is, in perceptual error, some object is mistaken for something else. Shell is mistaken for silver. The object in front is only shell, just rope. Rope mistaken for snake. Shell, a small piece of shell. I don't see it as a shell. If I perceive shell as a shell, it is a valid cognition, no problem at all. Instead of perceiving shell as a shell, a small piece of object, triangular in shape or bluish in color or circular in shape. When you walk along the beach, in the sandy beach, we'll see that one. We'll pick it up, try to pick it up, thinking it is a silver coin. It's only shell. So that is the perceptual error in which we mistake a small piece of shell for silver, just as we mistake rope for snake. I change the example. Now the question is, you claim to have seen silver. What is its ontological status? Is it real or is it unreal? Is there shell? Is there silver there? If it is there, then it is Sat. An object which is existent is Sat. An object which is not existent is Asat. We use the two terms like that. If it is existent, we will say, yes, it is Sat. Supposing it is not there, it is non-existent, we will say it is Asat. So, the object of erroneous perception, whatever it may be snake, it may be silver, you can multiply examples. Now we want to know the ontological status, metaphysical status of that object. The object of erroneous perception. Is it Sat or is it Asat? Now the First, we will dispose of this theory. The Sunyavadin, the Madhyamika philosopher, Sunyavadin, he holds the view that every object is a Sat. There is no object which is Sat. Every object, according to him, is a Sat. No object really exists. He will try to prove it by his own logic. Chatushkodi logic. Whether it is or it is not, or it is both and is not, neither is nor is not. Over. So, the Madhyamika Buddhism, Sunyavada Buddhism, holds the view that even the object of erroneous perception must be asat, because even the ordinary case, the object of perception is asat, because it doesn't exist at all. No object really exists, including the object of erroneous perception. For him, the problem is easy. So, the asatyadi is entertained by the Madhyamika Buddhist or the Sunyavadi. Others hold the view that it is something existent. Just as in valid perception, the object that is seen exists, even so in erroneous perception, the object seen, it is something existent. You can't just totally dismiss it. Now, there are subdivisions for this. The Vijnanavadin explains this in terms of Atmakyadi. Atmakyadi. He calls this theory of his explanation of perceptual error as Atmakyadi. The Nyaya explains the theory in terms of Anyatha-kyadi. Anyatha-kyadi. Atmakyadi and Anyatha-kyadi. The Vaisesika agrees with the Nyaya. The modification of Anyatha-kyadi, the Bhattas also are prepared to accept Anyatha-kyadi. They just change the name. Viparita-kyadi. Substantially it is the same as the Anyatha-kyadi of the Nyaya school, the Bhatta school. Just sometimes they use the term Viparita-kyadi. So this is Anyatha-kyadi, the term, the Nyayika, the Bhattas. Substantially it is the same. Just to call it there is some difference in the explanation somewhere, but Viparita-kyadi. Don't bother about it, it is only Anyatha-kyadi, we can say. The Prabhakaras, they explain it in terms of Akyadi. And the Sankhyas also are prepared to agree with the Prabhakaras, that they also hold Akyadi. So how many we have? We started with the Sunyavada, Sunyavadin, Asatyadi, then his colleague Vijnanavadin, Vijnanavada Buddhism, otherwise called Yogachara Buddhism, another name for that, Vijnanavadin or Yogachara Buddhism. He holds Atmakyadi Nyayikas and Vaisesikas, we always put in the front in Nyayika. Anidhakyadi. The Bhattas, they substantially subscribe to the same thing. They want to have their own individuality. They just call it as a Viparita-kyadi. Sankhya school, Sankhya yoga, Akyadi. Prabhakaras mainly this. Then behind the Prabhakaras, like Sankhya school will come and all that. So, we have got now 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All these come under Satyadi. Then we have Anirvachaniya Kyadi Advaita. It doesn't come under either this classification or that classification. The object of erroneous perception, it cannot be termed Asat, nor can it be termed Sat. The Advaitin says it has to be termed as Anirvachaniya. Anirvachaniya. So, this theory, the Advaita theory is called Anirvachaniya Kyadi, because the object of erroneous perception can never be called Sat, nor can it be called Asat, but it has to be characterized as Anirvachaniya. Neither real, neither Sat, nor Asat, but Anirvachaniya. We can't term it either this or that. So the third alternative is just to say it is Anirvachaniya. How many? Altogether 5 Kyadis. That's all. Anything more? English translation is very difficult. Therefore, you should be familiar with the terminology as it is. The Madhyamika position is easy of explanation because he is not prepared to accept anything, either as Sat or Asat. Everything is Asat. Shunya. So, Sunyavada, the Madhyamika school, Asatkyadi. The Vijnanavadin Buddhism says it is what is known as Atmakyadi, what is inside me. Atman, it is used technically. Don't take it as a self immediately. What is in me? If you think I am only the self, yes, what is in me? That is wrongly projected outside. The Vijnanavada school does not accept any external object at all. That is the metaphysical position. There is no external world, no external object. Totally denies the existence of the external world. Then what else is there? Only myself and my ideas. If you want, you can say the self and its ideas, whatever it may be. The self and its ideas. But don't I see something external to me? Well, you may see, you may claim to see that one. All that is erroneous, illusory. What is inside is wrongly projected as if it is existing outside you. Nothing outside. What really exists is Vijnana. Vijnana. That's why it's called Vijnanavadin. Vijnana. Don't go into the question of Jnana, Vijnana, we say Prajnana, all that is. Vijnana in the sense of cognition. All that exists is cognition, not single cognition. It is a series of cognitions. A procession will be going on, one after another. I made a reference in one of my lectures to a series, because everything is momentary. if every cognition is momentary, it goes like a procession. The ant erumbu povum paaruங்க பாப்போம். நீ வேடிக்கை பார்த்துட்டே இருக்கலாம். நீ போயிட்டு இருக்கும். Like a procession. A series of cognitions going one after another. Cognitions mean subjective. Nothing outside. But don't we think that there are objects outside? Yes, you may think, but there are no objects outside you. The cognition which is subjective is wrongly viewed as something objective. That is his basic philosophical standpoint. So, when the question is asked in this erroneous perception, when I say that there is a small piece of silver in front of me, no. You have the idea of silver in you, the vijnana is there. That idea, vijnana is translated as idea now. That idea, the idea is purely subjective. Ideas are in me. But I wrongly project it as existing in the world of space-time causality. This theory is called Vijnanavada. Therefore, he just accounts for error in terms of what is technically called Atmakyadi. Atman is only the self. The self is made up of, don't look for any substantive entity. Substantive entity, no. As the Nyaya views or somebody else views. The Advaita speaks of the self as consciousness. That is something different. It is something eternal, permanent. Nothing is permanent for him. Therefore, he cannot take side with the Advaita. And what is purely a subjective vijnana, a cognition, the cognition is projected as if it is pointing to an object outside. So, if you ask the question, is there a piece of shell silver outside me which I view? No. It is only silver idea you have. This silver idea which is subjective is wrongly projected as if it is external to you. Shankara criticizes the entire theory. Very thoroughgoing criticism. It is there is a statement which is attributed to Dharmakirti, the cognition of blue, and therefore corresponding to the blue cognition there is something outside. Can you quote that verse in the Vijnanavada criticism? Shankara refers to this statement of Dharmakirti. They say identify it. He doesn't mention the name. That quotation, that idea, that blue cognition of blue cognition and the object that is projected as blue. Leave it. We are not bothered about it. I will tell you. So they say this statement is from Dharmakirti, and therefore, since it quoted, that statement is quoted by Shankara, Shankara must be after Dharmakirti, posterior to that, later than Dharmakirti. They fix the date of Dharmakirti because Dharmakirti is historical person starting from Buddha, 500 BC that time. They fix the date, therefore they say end of the 17th century, 7th century and the beginning of the 8th century. But the critics say that Dharmakirti must have borrowed that idea earlier from some other floating idea, because in the tradition many ideas are floating and then at a particular stage they were crystallized. So Vijnanavada came after Buddha, probably certainly earlier than Buddha, earlier than Shankara. But how do you say that that you have firmly fixed the date of Dharmakirti? Shankara may quote, probably Dharmakirti might have used But even earlier, that idea must have been there prevalent. How do you know? We don't know. But don't try to fix the date as Shankara on the basis of your identification of this statement as that of Dharmakirti. Dharmakirti might have borrowed this idea from somebody else. So Vijnanavada is over. Atmakyadi. Now, the crucial criticism that Shankara makes against Vijnanavada is, how do you talk about outside and inside? The very distinction for you is untenable. How do you know? How do you say that what is inside me as an idea, that blue cognition, is viewed wrongly as blue existing somewhere in the outside world? How do you have the distinction between inside and outside? We can make, not you. There is nothing for you excepting Vijnanas, a series of cognitions, one going after another. Don't talk about what is inside, what is subjective, what is objective. Such a distinction does not arise for you. The very notion of what is external, what is outside, the very notion is impossible for you. You don't accept any Bhahyartha. So it is disposed of summarily. But Shankara, he discusses, not that elaborate discussion in the second Adhyaya. So Anida Akhyadi of the Nyayika, Akhyadi of the Prabhakaras, including Sankhyas, a slight modified version of Anida Akhyadi as Vipirita Akhyadi by the Bhattas, disposing of all of them, there is going to be Anirvachani Akhyadi. Anida Akhyadi. What does the Nyayika has got to say? Anida Akhyadi is translated as cognition otherwise. Anyatha otherwise. Khyadi cognition. Cognition otherwise. We seem to be in a tangible ground now when the Nyayika comes into the scene. It's something great. Anida Akhyadi. Cognition otherwise. Instead of cognizing shell as shell, I have cognized it otherwise as silver. Cognition otherwise. Normally, I should have cognized it as shell. It's a small piece of shell. But I have cognized it as silver. There are many points of similarity. Some somewhat circular shape, a bluish tinge, and also shining. So you can give many points of similarity. Therefore, you see that one. And you have developed some kind of expectation. Well, I don't have even anything to buy. I want to buy peanuts in the sandy beach as I am walking. I feel like having. Probably I think it is a piece of small silver. So there is the expectation, there is the pramatra dosha. I don't go into the details because that has to be dealt with. So what are the contributory factors? There are many contributory factors. Pramatra dosha, prameya dosha. Sometimes there may be pramana dosha, but not now. In other cases, maybe. And samskaras. And in addition to that, there is the most important factor, avidya. I am conditioned by avidya. So, what is elsewhere? Where is the silver? Maybe silver may be in the silver shop. What is elsewhere? I have seen elsewhere the silver somewhere, or at home I have. What is elsewhere? Anita. I have seen that one. The impressions of the previous cognition of silver elsewhere, that is revived now. How is it that it is revived? Because of similarity. There must be some contributory factor, similarity. Thank you. But the the object is not in front of me. I don't see that. What I see is no doubt shell. But all these contributory factors, and one more, you will remember that I refer to three kinds of extraordinary perception, three kinds of alaukika pratyaksha. First is samanya jnana, the other is jnana lakshana, the third is yogaja. Now he takes the second one, complicated perception. Usually the example that we give is ice looks cold. I see the piece of ice, block of ice. That it is cold has to be perceived through my tactile sense. I must go and touch it to see that it is cold. Because of the previous association, I have touched several times ice piece, block of ice, and then I see now the object before me. There is perception and the previous experience, remembrance. Somehow, the moment I see the block of ice, I say, it looks cold. I see it cold. I can see the shape. I can't see the coldness. For that, there is the appropriate sense organ is the tactile sense, touch sense. But the two, because the association of ideas are combined, I'm able to make a statement immediately. Oh, it looks cold, very cold. It is a case of jnana lakshana. Jnana lakshana, pratyasat. So that similarity comes in. A complicated perception. Therefore, what is elsewhere, bearing similarity to the object in front, being revived by the similarity, I think of it. Therefore, I say, here is silver. The elsewhere silver is perceived as it is in front. Anyada kyadi. It is a case of cognition otherwise. Something wrong with, I had the problem of similarity and I thought of it, remembered, and then immediately I said that it is there. Because I've seen the similarity between shell and silver. Anyada kyadi. It is a wrong cognition, therefore the Bhattas call it viparita kyadi. Anyada kyadi, they call it as a wrong cognition. It's not just merely cognition otherwise, it's a case of viparita jnana, therefore viparita kyadi. Now the main objection against this theory is I am claiming that the object is in front of me. I am protesting. I am not remembering this silver in the silver shop or elsewhere. I see that in front of me. It is an object which is purovartida. I see that here. It's not a case of just I remember. I am what is seen elsewhere by association of ideas is not confused with the object in front. And when I deny the existence of the silver here, I say the object, this is not silver but shell. That is the demonstrative pronoun this. The this refers to the object in front. Earlier I claimed this is silver. Now when I correct myself, when there is the badhaka jnana, I say this is not silver, this is not silver, but snake, but shell. Then if I make the correction, I must say this is not silver, but the silver is in the shop. I don't say that. Why do you foist something on me when I do not make such a claim? My simple claim is this is silver. Subsequently I say this is not silver but shell. The main strength is in the pratisheda jnana. What is prasakta is pratisheda. Now, prasakta, what is given is denied. What is not given is cannot be denied. Prasakta pratisheda. It is prasakta, it is in front of me. Then I deny it. I deny that it is in front. It is not, I say something else. So, Anidhakyadi also is rejected. I go in a hurry because you have to discuss that in detail, several objections and all that one. That is the second Anidhakyadi, slightly modified by the Bhattas as Viparidhakyadi. Then comes Akyadi of the Prabhakaras and the Sankhya system, Sankhyas, mainly Prabhakaras. Akyadi is non-cognition. Translation is easy. Non-cognition. Kyadi cognition, Akyadi non-cognition. The Prabhakaras now complicate the issue. They make the Nyaya a better one. How is it that there is the non-cognition of the object in front? The object in front is no doubt shell, but there is non-cognition of shell. Then how is it that I am able to see it as silver? Non-cognition of shell, right? But there is a cognition of silver. How do you account for that? Now the Prabhakaras say there is not just one cognition, but there are two cognitions here. There is not just one cognition. Actually, there are two cognitions. What are the two cognitions? One is perception, the other is memory. Memory is also a cognition. There are two cognitions, perception and memory. What is the content of perception? The object in front. But the perceptual cognition is not fully complete. Only part of it is there, part of it is forgotten. That is, forgetfulness is a dosha. Had it been in completeness or fullness, I would have said this is a shell. The subject part of it is properly cognized. The predicate part of the object, the Visheshamsa of the object. I said earlier, I have told you that there are two aspects with regard to every object, Samanyamsa and Visheshamsa. The subject of the statement represents the Samanyamsa of the given object and the predicate the Visheshamsa. Every object can be called this, that. So this refers to the object generally. What is that? It is really shell. So if my cognition, perceptual cognition, has been complete in every respect, I should have cognized the object as shell. What will be the formation of a statement? This is shell. Samanyamsa has been cognized. Inge problem apa? Okay. All right. This Samanyamsa has been cognized by me, but I have not. There has been forgetfulness with regard to the Visheshamsa. Now, the situation has been made complicated by the work of memory. Memory is also another cognition. The silver, which I have seen earlier, Unfortunately, I have remembered. The memory has projected that. So, the content of memory and the content of perception, they have been fused. There is non-cognition or akhyadi in both the cases. Part of what is perceived and part of what is remembered, in both the cases there is an incompleteness. They have been combined, made into one cognition. Therefore, I say this is silver. Incompleteness both with regard to perception and also, had I known that silver is in my memory, I would not have committed that mistake. It is in memory. But I forgot that it is in memory. Memory object. Object, I caught hold of it. The memory aspect I have forgotten. So, an incompleteness with regard to perception, an incompleteness with regard to memory, and the two incomplete cognitions have been combined, unfortunately for me. Therefore, I say this is silver. That's why I say that one more complicated than Nyaya position, Anidakhyadi. Therefore, he says that it is only a case of akhyadi. That means I have not committed any. In logic we make a distinction between two kinds of problems that we have: omission and commission. You omit something, then you deliberately commit a mistake, commission. Something corresponding to what we call agrahana and anyata-agrahana. Agrahana is omission. Anyata-agrahana or viparya-agrahana is commission. You commit a mistake. In the one case, the failure to notice something. In the other case, misinterpreting the given. So, there is no error in the positive sense of the term. In perceptual problem that we are discussing, the Prabhakaras say, there is no positive error. There is only a case of omission. Omission in both the cases. Double omission. Perception is incomplete. Memory also is incomplete. And the two incomplete cognitions have been fused together because of not noticing what it is. So, the incomplete aspect of perception has been combined with the incomplete aspect of memory, and therefore, there is what is called the so-called error. They say it's not real error, it's only the so-called error. It is called akhyadi, so-called error. But the problem is, why is it that there is incompleteness with regard to perception, incompleteness with regard to memory? Why? How did it take place? The Prabhakaras must account for the reason why the two cognitions are incomplete. Each of them is incomplete. They try to give the explanation, not that they will keep quiet, but the position doesn't seem to be satisfactory. The problem also will be there with regard to when you see something which is white as yellow. The conch is white, but you see it as yellow. Why? They try to explain every case of perceptual error as a case of akhyadi. So, asatyadi of the Madhyamika Buddhist, Atmakhyadi of the Vijnanavadin, Anyadakyadi of the Nyayika, the slight modification, Viparitakyadi of the Bhattas, Akhyadi of the Prabhakaras and the Sankhyas. So we have got four. The fifth one is anirvachanikyadi. Anirvachanikyadi. So the Advaita introduces the concept of anirvachaniya. Why does he introduce this concept? And how is this, as we view that, as we study that, it seems to be satisfactory. Now first we have to consider the way in which he explains the categories. Sat, that which is existent is Sat. Then we will qualify it in such a way that the term Sat refers to only one entity, that is Brahman. Brahman alone is, nothing else. Brahman alone is Sat. So the term Sat, can you give an example for that? There is no example. Sat is only Brahman, Brahman is Sat. Its exact opposite is Asat. Sometimes we translate Sat as being. Being is existence. When we say Sadeva Somi Idamagrasiti, being, Sat. Real sometimes we translate as real. It all depends upon the way in which you do. Real. You can say real. Its exact opposite is Asat. That which is totally non-existent. That which is ever existent is Sat. Now because I have to do the explanation for here, I qualify it. That which is ever existent is Sat. Ever existent, only Brahman. That which is totally non-existent is Asat. Totally non-existent, past, present and future. Everywhere it is non-existent. I don't think that the American can claim, oh, ours is a wonderful land. Therefore, there is something which is Asat in our country. It's totally non-existent. In all places and in all periods of time. If you say it is real, I say that it is non-real. I use this translation because in logic we are told that we can give the exact opposite for any term. For any term, we can give the opposite. For good, we say opposite bad. Simple opposites we are taught in the beginning itself. Vocabulary, we see opposites. Can you give the opposite of red? We can give, logically we can say non-red. Anything other than red comes into the category called non-red. That is to say, we adopt what is called the division by dichotomy. Division by dichotomy. Cutting into two, dividing into two. Anything. Table, can you give opposite? Yes, non-table. Everything other than table is non-table. What are the items you will have in non-table? We don't know. Anything other than table will be non-table. What about this? I can say non-table. What about this? Non-table. What about myself? Non-table. So, logically it helps us a lot, particularly the Advaita. So, there is Sat on the one hand, real, that which is ever existent, that which is all the time real. Real. That which is totally non-existent, I can say being, non-being, real, non-real. I don't say unreal. For some reason. So, in addition to these two categories, two extremes. Here is Brahman, here is something which is totally non-existent. Example, sky flower, totally non-existent. hare's horn, Mechanus coal, add some more, Agaya Pandal, Ponnunjal, there the Agaya Pandal, totally non-existent. How do you characterize that one? The yoga system, I told you, Vikalpakya Vritti. We require a Vritti even here. What kind of a Vritti? Not Antakarana Vritti, not even Avidya Vritti, not Ishvara Vritti, Maya Vritti for Ishvara. But we have got a special kind of Vritti contributed by the yoga system. They call it Vikalpa. Huh? Yeah. For an object, for a word corresponding to which there is no entity. Vastu Sunyam. That is called by the yoga system Vikalpakya Vritti. The Vritti is called as Vikalpa. And therefore, we speak of the sky flower. But corresponding to that, there is no object at all, anywhere, at any time. So we have got two extremes, Sat and Asat. Real and non-real, or being and non-being. Now, there are objects which cannot be characterized as Sat, that is reserved only for Brahman. There are objects which cannot be called Asat because they exist and we see them, we experience them. How do you characterize them? Sat must be existent all the time. It can't be absent at any time. You can't say it does not exist. There is no bada for that, no sublation for that. Now, the entity which is called Asat, it is a non-object which can be cognized, no pratiti. Now, objects which cannot be called Sat, objects which cannot be called Asat, that forms the third category. Now, I usually say, here we have got the third category of objects which can be characterized as third category. Third category. How third? Different from the first, Sat, different from the second. For want of a better term, I say it's the third category. Traditionally, we say it is something anirvachaniya, which cannot be described as Sat, which cannot be described as Asat. Sat asatbhavyam anirvachaniya. Sat is reserved only for Brahman. So, the third category, objects which are brought here in the mid position, avoiding the two extremes. What is the principle that we give? Why is it that you call them as anirvachaniya? I cannot call it as Sat because badhyamanatvatana Sat. I cannot call it as Asat because I am able to see that one. Pratiyamanatvatana Asat. How do you call them? Anirvachaniya. They belong to the third category. How do you get the concept of third category? Just as we speak of the fourth, we can speak of it as the third category. It starts from Maya and all its products. Maya and its products, Maya is anirvachaniya. We just say anirvachaniya, we can fully say that one. Sat asadbhavyam anirvachaniya. What cannot be characterized as Sat, what cannot be characterized also as Sat, that is what we call as Maya. It's the third category. All the objects that has evolved from Maya, they belong to the third category. Anirvachaniya. Therefore, coming to the problem that we are having, the object of erroneous perception, can you call it as Sat? No. It cannot be called a Sat because it suffers sublation. Principle, badhyamanatvatana Sat. It suffers sublation. I say it is not silver, but shell. There are two cognitions I told you, initial cognition and it is followed by sublating cognition. If there is no sublating cognition, probably you will be tempted to say it is Sat. No, immediately it comes. How soon is not the question. It may come the next moment, it may come, it may be a delayed sublation, it suffers sublation. Therefore, it is not Sat. Can you say it is Asat, this is silver? No, because what is Asat can never be experienced, can never be cognized. This is a case where there is pratiti, cognition. I see the silver. So subsequently you say it is not silver. Since it suffers sublation on the one hand and is also subject to pratiti, we are not in a position to say that it is Sat or that it is Asat. Therefore, we prefer to use the third category expression, it's anirvachaniya. So, here there is what is called anirvachaniya kyadi. Cognition, kyadi is cognition, cognition of an entity which cannot be described as Sat or as Asat. That is the fifth theory that we have, anirvachaniya kyadi, which cannot be classed under either asatyadi or satyadi. It is given a separate place classification. We call it as anirvachaniya kyadi. Any questions with regard to this problem? Yes? What about? Probably as realists, I don't think that because Sautrantikas accept the existence of objects outside. I don't know whether the problem of error would be described by them as the Nyaya would do. Same thing with regard to Vaibhashika. Probably they sail in the same company with any realist, like the Nyaya. But with regard to other two schools, each has claims to put forward a particular claim, a particular theory. Atmakyadi are the Vijnanavadins, and Shunyavadins are the Asatyadi are the Shunyavadins.
Jainas, what do they do?
Huh?
Jainas.
I'm not sure about that. Because they have got alternative predications, Anekantavada. I am not sure whether, because in the Kyadivada discussion, completely they are kept outside, which makes us think that possibly they were not so much concerned with the problem. Because the classification, Panchakyadi we say, 4 we have accounted for in terms of other systems. Under the broad classification, because we raised the question whether it is something Sat, existent or non-existent. So, had a theory been formulated, certainly would have come in the classical texts. There is an elaborate discussion in the Brahma-siddhi. For Mandana, the target is Akyadivadiyam, Prabhakaras. Mandana will go to a great extent with the Bhattas. Mandana cannot go with the Prabhakaras. It's a thorough criticism running to several pages of Prabhakara's Akyadivada. Charvaka, no problem, because for him, problem of perception. I don't think that in the mainstream of the discussion of the problem, the Prabhakaras, the Charvakas come. And the Vedantins, Ramanuja, partly Anidakyadi they say, and partly Akyadi. And Ramanuja seems to favor Anidakyadi, whereas Vedanta-vedanta seems to say it is a slightly different, it is not just Anidakyadi, also there is room for Akyadi. Any specific name I don't think has been given to the Dvaita theory. I'm not sure about that. Because as you proceed, because it doesn't come in the major classification, marginally you just try to omit. Abhinava Nidakhyadi. Abhinava Nidakhyadi. That Abhinava is very important. But in many places, to start with, Ramanuja says Nidakhyadi. A distinct formulation is given by using the word Abhinava Nidakhyadi, new Nidakhyadi. That means basically the Nyaya is there. So Swamiji, you said, come. Anirvachaniya, how is it different from? Anitya. No, Anitya means that is impermanent. We are not using that term at all here because not that it is impermanent. The question is, when you see that one, whether it is existent or not. Subsequently, what happens to that is not the question. What is your claim? Did you perceive an existent silver or a non-existent silver? Supposing you say existent means, what is the ontological status of that existence? How do you define that the existence of that ground? How do you define that? And Advaita gives the definition of Sat. One may agree, one may not agree. The problem is viewed in terms of the definition of Sat and Asat and finding a logical predicament such that we cannot call it Sat, we cannot call it Asat. The Advaita says that it has to be given a logical status. What kind of a logical status? We will call it as Anirvachaniya. Anirvachaniya. Atmakyadi Vijnanavadis.
Then in Advaita itself there is one theory of Drishti-Srishtivada.
Huh? Drishti-Srishtivada.
So if you take Drishti-Srishtivada and Atmakyadi, there doesn't seem to be much difference as far as perceptual error is concerned, or is there any difference? Of course, with Drishti-Srishtivada, this Anirvachaniya,
Everything.
But with Drishti-Srishtivada, what happens?
I'm not sure how I should going to answer, but certainly it is not the same thing as Atmakyadi. Drishti-Srishtivada accepts the reality of the self as something which is permanent, immutable. That is the self, even for the Drishti-Srishtivada. The problem is only with regard to the external object. Now, the external object is a projection, is a creation by the self. Therefore, the Drishti-Srishtivada will be a case of Ekajivavada, and the self, even for the Drishti-Srishtivadian, is something which is substantial, which is permanent, immutable, and all that one. Atmakyadi, Akyadi, the Vijnanavadian says there are only cognitions which come and go. They constitute what you call the self. Self is not a substantive entity. And Buddhism will not accept the self as a substantive entity, whatever be the school. And therefore, the two cannot be compared with each other. And the problem does not arise for the Drishti-Srishtivadin because whatever he sees is only his creation. Therefore, the real shell is my creation. The silver that I claim to see, it is equally my creation, my Srishti. Therefore, this is not a problem at all. Only for those who say, even empirically for the Advaita, there are objects outside us. And Shankara's criticism, he says, Sarva Pramana Siddham, the external world, I am not able to quote. Objects of the external world, that they exist, is proved by all the Pramanas. How do you set aside all that is pointed out by the pramanas? Not one pramana, not just pratyaksha. By pratyaksha, anumana, upamana, wherever necessary you can bring in the pramanas. When the existence of the entire external world is proved by all the pramanas, how do you say that there is no such thing as external object? Number one. Then Shankara says, how do you make such a distinction between external and internal? For you, there is no basis for making such a distinction. So such a thoroughgoing discussion is taking place with regard to the Vijnanavada. And Asatyadivada, because Shunyavada itself is not thoroughly discussed there, it goes away. Vijnanavada comes in. One point that I would like to stress once again is that this kind of sophisticated discussion that we have in the Indian philosophical literature with regard to the problem of perception. Strawson has written a book on perception. Oxford, Strawson. Western philosophers are concerned with the problem of perception. They discuss the theory of illusion. Illusion, they use the word, erroneous perception, illusion, which is different from hallucination. The two are not the same. But why is it that such a kind of a sophisticated discussion, Khyadivadas, that find an important place in the philosophical literature, that is not there? Of course, that is not our concern. But when we are doing comparative studies of philosophical positions, this is an important problem. You can say that we are not concerned with Arthapati, all that is all that, you can leave. But in perception, you have got this problem of error. How do you account for that one? You can't just say it's a case of illusion, like seeing a stick in a column of water in a glass, bent, it appears bent. You can say in psychology, we discuss it's a case of illusion. It is a medium that is responsible, you say. The glass medium in which the water is kept, and you just insert a straight stick. It appears to be bent, you see it bent. So the distortion is made by the glass and the water there. All right. Here we must also discuss in other cases. You can't just say case of illusion. How does it arise? We hoist the flag. Look here. Look here. This is what you are saying. Alternative views are given, not just one view. If you have an occasion anywhere, you make such a declaration. I am telling this to my young students. For that, you have to be familiar with the text. And you have to take the text, and then somebody who can handle the text, sit and study. It will be very profitable. If Matthew Lal, who wrote a book on perception, our own man, who is teaching in Temple University, it's a good model. Why don't you do that one? Tomorrow, we'll, as usual, meet 9:30. Then I will move on to some important issues in Advaita. We'll close it.